Look at this face. This is Zeus, the supreme authority of the Greek pantheon. But right now, he is planning a divine trap. He owes a favor to the sea nymph Thetis to honor her son, the sidelined warrior Achilles. And to do it, Zeus decides to actively deceive the commander of the Greek army, Agamemnon. The timing couldn't be worse for the Greeks. Achilles has withdrawn his forces after a bitter dispute, leaving the coalition without its most lethal weapon. Agamemnon is politically vulnerable. He desperately needs a massive, decisive victory right now to justify his leadership and keep his fracturing army together. So Zeus sends an oulon oniron, a destructive dream. The dream descends into the Greek camp and takes the form of Nestor, the senior counselor Agamemnon trusts most. Leaning over the sleeping king, the phantom whispers a lethal piece of fiction. The gods are finally united, and if Agamemnon attacks Troy today, the city will fall. And Agamemnon buys it completely. He ignores the tactical reality that he just lost his best fighter. When we look at this hammered gold mask, the rigid, unyielding face of a man entirely consumed by his own ego, we see a commander who hears exactly what his hubris wants him to hear. In this moment, the entire structure of the Greek military command is suspended over a void. Agamemnon's supreme royal authority isn't based on strategy or intelligence. It rests entirely on a hallucination. It is a false order, and it is about to violently collapse. Instead of simply ordering the attack, Agamemnon tries a bizarre psychological maneuver. He calls a full assembly of the army and decides to test their loyalty. He stands before the men, holds up his royal scepter, and lies to them again. He announces that the war is a failure, Troy is unconquerable, and it is time to sail home. He expects them to protest, to demand a fight. Instead, the army breaks. 9 years of disease, trauma, and exhaustion instantly boil over, and the men literally sprint for the ships. They kick out the launch props and start dragging the heavy wooden hulls into the water. Think about the scale of this miscalculation. The entire 10-year epic of the Trojan War, all the blood, the sacrifices, the vows, almost permanently ends on this specific afternoon, simply because a king tried to get clever with traumatized soldiers. The illusion of command evaporates in seconds. Agamemnon's titles mean nothing the moment thousands of armed, desperate men realize they possess the sheer physical mass to turn their backs and walk away. The coalition needs a fixer, and they need one immediately. Prompted by Athena, the goddess of tactical warfare intervening from above, Odysseus steps into the chaos to stop the humiliating retreat. He grabs Agamemnon's royal scepter and wades into the mob, deploying a brutally stratified approach. When he meets a fellow nobleman, he uses diplomacy, gently reminding them of their duty. But when he encounters a screaming commoner, he uses the heavy scepter as a club, physically beating the lower-class soldiers back into line. Out of this violence emerges Thersites. He is the only common soldier given a speaking role in the entire epic, and he starts screaming the uncomfortable truth. He points at Agamemnon and loudly announces that the king is just hoarding gold and women, and that the regular troops are dying for absolutely nothing. Odysseus doesn't debate him. He publicly threatens to strip Thersites naked, and then violently smashes the scepter across the soldier's back and shoulders until he bleeds and cries. And the army, terrified and craving direction, actually laughs at the dissenter's pain. The Greek military hierarchy isn't preserved through high-minded inspiration or moral superiority. It survives because the elite class is entirely willing to inflict sheer public violence on the lower classes, forcing the rank and file back into absolute submission. With the mutiny physically crushed, the troops are standing still, but they are hollowed out. Odysseus and Nestor know that fear isn't enough to sustain a siege. They have to replace the men's panic with a unifying, overarching narrative. Now they deploy a massive rhetorical pivot. Odysseus reminds the army of a sacred omen they witnessed years ago at Aulis, where a snake devoured a mother bird and her 8 young. He reframes that memory, arguing it was a divine promise from Zeus that they would suffer for 9 years but conquer Troy in the 10th. The strategy works. By tying their current misery to a divine timeline, Odysseus injects a sense of holy destiny back into the ranks. The crowd shifts from a fearful, fleeing mob back into an army ready for holy conquest. Physical enforcement stopped the desertion, but ideological control keeps the men on the beach. Giving traumatized soldiers a sacred, mythological reason to die is the psychological glue that holds the empire together. Look at this printed page, the catalog of ships. Readers often skip this massive block of text as a repetitive roster, but look at the text itself. The catalog is the ultimate structural antidote to the chaos. After an hour of near-total collapse, the poem asserts order through a rigorous, unrelenting rhythm, cataloging exactly who is there, who commands them, and how many ships they brought. This recitation acts as a sweeping geopolitical map. It takes the fractured, competing identities of the Greek world and binds them tightly together. Every city, every leader, and every soldier is accounted for and locked into a single massive war machine. The psychological transformation of the army is complete. They have hardened from a terrified mob scrambling for the water into an intimidating, highly ordered phalanx. With the hierarchy restored, this terrifying force marches out onto the plain. The stage is finally set for the intimate, bloody duel between Paris and Menelaus that kicks off the action in Book 3. Agamemnon's individual hubris brought the coalition within minutes of total dissolution. But the brutal mathematical efficiency of the Greek hierarchy, enforced by clubs, secured by myth, and measured out ship by ship, ultimately succeeded in forcing the men back into the meat grinder.